Okay, so the last topic I want to talk about is basically getting a postdoc position. So to maybe set the scene of where I'm coming from with this question is that I've got about, or pretty much exactly 14 months left of my PhD contract. And after that, I'll be unemployed, but hopefully I have a PhD and can apply for postdoc positions. Yeah, to maybe set the scene a bit more. Obviously, I'm not asking you as like a world-leading expert on postdoc applications, but more as a kind of, let's say, the metaphor might be like an older brother, someone who's like one step ahead of me in this whole process and who can, who's seen a few things, knows a few people, and can maybe give some advice here. So maybe we can start by talking about how you got your position, because it seems like that was... I don't know what the process was like of getting a position, but it seems like you're pretty happy with what you're doing and who you're doing it with and where and that kind of stuff. So maybe I'll just ask very broadly, how did you get your position?
It's a very good question. I think it's also a very important question because for everybody who, looks for a PhD position or a postdoc, I think it's pretty much a very similar process. So it's just a very important thing that you choose your lab wisely. And it's kind of, I'm happy to talk about that. And yes, as you said, for me, it was a very positive experience. And part of this is, maybe I was just lucky, but also I like to think that it was not just luck, because what I did and what I would, recommend to anyone is I tried to do like a systematic approach and really think about how to choose it and try to follow my kind of system. So what I did is, or
maybe can I one question before maybe, because at least to me, this seems like a relevant factor that might be worth explaining kind of where you were at the time. So from what I can tell is the publications you have when you apply for stuff is important. If you have great publications, then it's probably easier to get a position than if you have nothing. So when you were applying for positions, did you already have publications? Which ones?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do have a few I would say really good publications from my PhD where I'm, I think it's good work and I'm happy about this. But the interesting thing is when I started applying for postdoc positions, and applying in my case, this wasn't a very long period. I actually just sent emails to a couple of people and asked them to meet at SFN, which was an in-person conference at the time. And hopefully it's going to be again soon. But anyway, so I just sent emails to a few people, and at this time, I did not have I did have one publication which was in Frontiers, and it's not even like a very empirical work, because this was more like from the technical background that I have. I had programmed like a toolbox for like a little bit more complex analysis, that like this grid cell like representation analysis. So this really was the only publication.
But so you had publications from before your PhD, right? But
oh yeah,
I guess that was a bit different because that was more like from a technical side rather than as a scientist, or?
Yes, correct. So the publications that I had when I was applying for a postdoc position were, either from like a different field that wasn't like super relevant for what I wanted to do in my postdoc, or it was this one publication which was, in the spatial navigation area. It was grid select representations, but this was really like a technical thing. It basically was like a software product that we had developed. So I did not, send an email out to these people saying, oh, well, look at my publication list. I was really, saying like, okay, this is what I have done. This is what I can do, technical background combined with like empirical focus. And I also said like what I want to do, and how this would fit with, what the lab is doing. So I really knew what these labs are doing, and I basically kind of gave them an outline of my potential role in their lab, right? And it could be different maybe for others, but I did not have the impression that kind of not having high impact or whatever kind of publications, I didn't feel that this was a problem, because I got very positive feedback. In the end, I was very lucky to be able to even choose the postdoc position that I ended up taking. And all of this, was before I had this, current biology paper, before I had the Nature Communications paper, before all of that. So that,
But
so
I guess
that
just
was very good.
I mean, yeah, I think it's maybe important to say that it's not, your career isn't over if you haven't published during your
Yeah,
PhD.
no, I don't think so at all. And one thing maybe also to say is, it maybe even like obviously it's good if you have publications, but if you have like a PI or an advisor who like is known in the field, and this person might just reach out to others and tells them like, okay, well, this guy or he or she is like really, really able, and yeah, there are no publications, but they will come, or they are not there for this and that reason. But I think it's just more important to show what you can do, and if you have someone like your advisor who maybe writes you a letter or reaches out to people, I think that can more than enough compensate for maybe not having one or two publications more.
I mean, I guess it's also, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm assuming also you might not have had the publications, but you already had projects that were developed enough that you could show that you knew what you were doing, right? It's not like I have these like 5 dreams I want to, I'm kind of working on these things and it's clear that there's nothing there. I'm assuming the 2 papers, the 2 high impact papers, at least you got from your PhD, I'm assuming it was already clear that once you talked to potential employers or supervisors about it, it was clear like, okay, yeah, there's something here. Like,
yes, and obviously if you get to that stage, you're gonna talk with them in more detail about what you have done or what you want to do. And then I was able to like really present stuff which wasn't published, but obviously yes, I had enough to show them, because yeah, as you said, these projects were already developed and some of them were even like submitted at this point already. It was just not accepted and published, but I had enough to talk about. And just very recently, Nathia also told me, I wasn't aware of this, but she said like, oh yeah, the most impressive thing for her, or one very impressive thing for her was like, I was really prepared. Like we just met informally at SFN. Like I sent her an email and she said like, oh yeah, let's meet. And I had a presentation on my laptop. I didn't, like kind of force her to look at this, but I asked her like, yeah, like I can tell you what I've done. I have a presentation here, show you a few things. And then I gave kind of a presentation, but in a more like, we're just chatting about it. But I had stuff prepared. And so she seemed to really like that. And it is, this I think is like, yeah, I hadn't had published that at this time, but I could really show her that this is cool stuff, so I think this is what convinced her, and I did the same thing with other people I met, so and it seemed to have worked really well.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that what you said reminded me of is that, so maybe one thing, like I've been in quite a lot of different labs, maybe just to say that up front, so and lots of them aren't on my CV, so this could be any of them. And I mean, it's not really a negative thing, but I don't want to talk about anyone's application process or these kind of things. But I was once in a lab where the PI really struggled to get a good postdoc. And the interesting thing is then we met with some of the applicants, and with a lot of them, I wasn't even sure whether they knew who the PI was or like what the group was doing. I was really shocked how, these were often, or some of them were, I think, I'm assuming people, I can't evaluate, but I'm assuming people who knew technically what they were doing. But sometimes I was really there like, do they even know like what the lab does? And I was really, I guess if you then come up with like a presentation and say like, look, here's what I'm going to do in your lab and how it fits in, then yeah, that's going to be a huge advantage, I'd imagine.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that I would recommend to, like know who you're talking to and then be prepared. It doesn't need to be, like a presentation in that sense, but definitely you want to know who you're talking to. You want to know,
and I guess also make that clear, right?
Yes,
so
yes,
like and I guess this should come up naturally in conversation anyway. But if it doesn't, then somehow make it clear that you've read the papers and know like specifically why you're
Yes, of course. I guess for me, it seems like a very good way to do that is, maybe you don't want to say, oh yeah, I have read all your papers and they're really good. The even better way would be to, like say, okay, here is what I can do, and this is how it would kind of fit into your lab, like
Yeah,
what we could do
exactly.
together. Like I would love to build upon what you have done, and obviously show that you know what they have done by saying, okay, I want to expand on this, or like just move this one step further. So at the end of the day, I also have the impression that you might end up doing something very different, because when you're in the lab, it's a different story. There might be someone who is already working on this or something like that, but it's just really good if you can show what they are doing, and you can show that you've made up your own mind, like how your own work would kind of fit with kind of what they're doing currently or what they have done in the past.
So how specific were the things that you suggested, or, it's not like saying I'm going to do this in your lab, but, I guess you said like, here's some ideas I have, some things I want to do that fit with the stuff that the lab is already doing. So like, how specific were the suggestions or projects or ideas you had when you came to it? Was it often, I don't know, was it fairly vague, like, or was it very specific? Like, here's the question, and you already knew like what the first experiment was going to be, or how kind of specific was that in your case?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I have to say, so I talked with a couple of people when I was looking for postdoc jobs, and it was very different. So the extent to what these people would expect me to have like a specific plan was very different. So I think honestly, this depends a lot on like the mentality of the potential advisor also. So my ideas were, like not planned to a level of, this is what I want to do exactly, and I have this, paradigm in mind and so on. It was more like a brainstorming stage where you're like, okay, you have done this and this is really exciting. You want to show that, you like this kind of work, and because otherwise, you shouldn't even apply at this job for this job. So you want to just make clear that you find that very interesting, and that you have ideas, and that you can develop ideas for that can be merged with what they are interested in. And so for me, this was always at a brainstorming level where I said like, okay, this kind of paper was really interesting. I would like to, like bring this to, like more the navigation context, add this and that, or we could look at, what grid cells are doing in this, something like that, but not really planned to a level of detail so that it's kind of a ready to go project. But also I will say that there were, so I had also conversations with people who I believe wanted to hear more. So I think it's just very different. I guess it also depends, if somebody has is looking for a postdoc who is then just supposed to do like a project for which there is already funding, and they know exactly what they want to do, then, like your own ideas, they might be good, but at the same time, they have a very specific role in mind that they want you to fill. But then there are other PIs who really look for postdocs and give them a lot of freedom and stuff. So there it might be maybe more helpful if you have like a very specific, like clear direction that you're interested in, and give them like a more sense of what exactly you want to do. So I think it's just really hard to say. It's something you probably also have to just feel out when you're talking with them. But definitely having a plan in mind doesn't hurt at all.
Yeah, I guess it's a good point you made that. Wait, what was the point? Yeah, that some positions are specific to a project, and they almost want someone to just do the thing that's already like laid out for them. And
Yes.
in other cases, I've heard of some people who, this might even have been published on the episode, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I had a conversation with one person who said they arrived at the postdoc position, and then the first day the PI said, "So, what do you want to do?"
Yeah,
and some are super open, and some are like very much like, "I've got 2 years to do this experiment. Do it, please."
Yeah, I guess it's something that is hard to to know beforehand. And maybe if you have kind of connections, it's good to, you know, like find this out, maybe via your current advisor, or maybe some kind of, or maybe you know somebody in the lab, which is obviously the best case scenario. But if you don't, you should be prepared to kind of, if you really want to be in this lab, you should be prepared to, you know, like basically fill both of these roles potentially, you know, like on the one hand, develop new ideas and be able also to present that in a meeting. But maybe also be prepared to, you know, like meet a person who already knows what they want you to do. So both, I know that both can happen, and you just have to, you also have to make up your own mind before, if you would be fine with, you know, like being told, yeah, this is the project, I want you to do this. Because if not, then, you know, it's not a bad thing. It's just, then this is probably not the right lab.
I think this is something that I have to be very careful with, because I'm not very good at executing someone else's plans. Sometimes I struggle executing my own plans.
I think we all do.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think I basically need a post. I mean, I have a PhD supervisor who gave me lots of freedom. And in some sense, it's also partly somewhat illusory, because I think we have very similar interests. So that makes it easier for him to give me freedom, knowing that, you know, I'm more or less going to do what he's interested in anyway. So yeah, I think that's, for example, for me, that's probably something I need to really pay attention to, because if I don't have a supervisor who gives me freedom, I just don't think it's going to be a good fit.
Yes,
yeah.
I 100% agree. And the thing is, there is even more to that. I feel the same like you do, you know. Obviously, sometimes it feels like it could be easier if somebody just tells you what to do. But then at the same time, you have to consider one more thing, and that's eventually you probably want to, or maybe you want to be like a PI yourself, right? And then if you haven't like learn to, you know, like develop your own ideas, or to even have ideas and know how to, I don't know, squeeze them out or whatever. And if you're just following someone else's ideas, or maybe even just execute projects that have been designed even without you, then you might not really know how to do this. You might not learn this carefully how to do it. So, I personally think if you want to end up like having your own lab and be a PI yourself, then it's probably the better thing to look for a postdoc position where you get that freedom to, you know, like obviously within the scope of your advisor, but to develop your own ideas, to, you know, find out, to make mistakes at the design level and to kind of correct it, and not just get something and execute it. I think that's like, if you look towards the future of like being in academia, I think it's just very important to not just execute someone else's plans.
Yeah, I mean, what I've noticed as, you know, PhD student who had a fair amount of freedom is that the hardest part for me is like really deciding, I guess because research projects often take a lot of time to do, deciding what to do is much more important almost than, I mean, not how you're doing it, but right, like if you're doing a project that's going to take you like 6 months to 2 years or whatever, you really have to be sure that that's something worth doing. Yes. And I think, for example, I've done a fair amount of side projects in my PhD, probably too many. And that's, I think, something, for example, that I've really learned, like a kind of don't like be careful for what you start almost. And I think that's part of the learning process of like doing your own projects. How, as I said, I've got exactly 14 months left. How early did you start contacting people, looking for people? I mean, was it clear for you, for example, you had like 3 people who were like, yeah, I'm going to contact them, and I hope one of them works out because they're perfect or whatever from the outside? Mm-hmm. Was it very much, or maybe I'll use my example again here just as a starting point or something to riff on. I kind of know which direction I want to go fairly clearly. I mean, lots of things could fall under that umbrella term, but I kind of know fairly much what I want to do. But right now, I don't have a specific person where I'd say like, okay, this seems like a perfect fit or whatever. Yeah. So like how far, like how, for example, how long does it take for these application processes? And
so I have to think about this. So I don't. Yeah, no, it comes back. So yeah, no, I think I started applying really early, but again, I didn't formally apply, you know. I was at a stage where I knew, okay, I'm probably gonna be ready to, you know, like leave the PhD nest kind of maybe in say a year or something, or maybe I was thinking it's gonna be 6 months, but turned out to be a year, something like that. So so I think it was like maybe I felt like, okay, I'm gonna be ready summer. Yeah, I thought I'm gonna be ready summer next year, and so I started applying like 6 months before. And these 6 months before, it was really just, you know, this was, yeah, I felt I would finish in summer. And so SFN came up, I think in November the year before I wanted to finish. And so I thought, okay, so this is going to be a good opportunity to, you know, like talk to people, because next SFN is like a year later. And SFN is just this big thing, or was this big thing where you just meet so many people also, you know, from basically all countries, also the US and everything. So this for me was a good opportunity, and I didn't just want to wait for the next one because that might have been too late. So I was reaching out to them like say 6-7 months before I wanted to be done. And I just sent emails. I think I attached my CV, but basically I was just, you know, explaining who I am and these kind of things. And then, yeah, I think literally everybody responded and said, yeah, let's meet. But this was very informal, you know, like,
Yeah.
just, yeah,
Sorry,
let's meet at Starbucks.
Did they have jobs, or did you just say, these are like people I'm interested in, I'll just contact them? Like, yeah, did they have positions, or was it just?
I had no idea. So, I mean, I can explain a bit more how I how I kind of narrowed down the kind of pool of labs, if that's maybe helpful. So, because that's something where I tried to be quite systematic, I would say. So, and I'm hoping that this might be helpful for others, maybe. So, first of all, I think there are just things that you can easily find out, right? So which is, first of all, you should ask yourself, like, what are you interested in? But I think at the level, like after your PhD, that should be pretty obvious. Like, okay, you want to start a postdoc and work on something that you're interested in. But that just first of all narrows down the possibilities of the labs that you want or you could apply. And again, I didn't look at open positions or anything. I really just basically said, okay, these are all the labs that I would be interested in. I even wrote down a list of labs whenever I heard like a talk somewhere or whatever, and I heard like, oh, they're working on stuff that sounds interesting. I just wrote down the lab and the PI's name just to have this list, and I built this during my PhD. And so,
yeah, you mean like to not start from zero, like
exactly
half a year before, going like, oh God, I don't know, yeah.
Exactly. So then when I kind of was nearing the end of my PhD, I had this list of people where I knew, okay, they are doing interesting work that might be interesting for me. And then, yeah, you kind of narrow this down based on what you really want to do, and also take other things into consideration for, of course, you know, like personal things, like where do you want to live and all of that. But also, you know, a very important thing is also like what kind of methods do they use? What kind of opportunities do they give you in terms of, you know, what university is it? What kind of equipment do they have? Do they have like just EEG, but you want to do fMRI? These kind of things. But that's pretty obvious. So that's very easy to find out, right? But then there are other things that are much harder to find out, but I really focused on this stuff. So and this is, I really wanted to, you know, look at the people that I'm supposed to work with. And I think this is an incredibly important thing, because there may be very good scientists in your research area. And, you know, like on my list of people that I had created during my PhD, lists of people who are doing cool science, interesting things, you know, there might be many really good scientists, but also if you are like me, you really want to work with people who are not only good scientists, but also much more than that, you know, who are, you know, it's very important that they are good mentors or good managers, really, who understand, you know, like how to collaborate, with others and put together teams of people that are both really good, really able to do this kind of work, but also who are nice and easy to work with. You want to work with people who are teachers, right? Even at the postdoc stage, you have to learn a lot of stuff, and you want to work with people who can teach you that kind of stuff. So, and these kind of things are much harder to find out than just, what they are working on and if they have like high impact publications and things. So for me, honestly, my main task was obviously, first of all, you see, okay, these labs are interesting, they have good publications, so that, and they are, like in the right country, whatever you're interested in. So that's the first step. But then I made it kind of my main task to really get a feeling of how is this person, and then when you maybe get invited to the lab or you give a talk there, like how are the people there in this lab, maybe even beyond the lab, in this institute. This to me is such an important thing, and I think it's kind of underrated, because it's almost like you're applying somewhere and there are maybe like, I don't know, 25 other people who apply for the same position, and you feel like, oh, please give me a job. But I think it's super important to kind of see it from the other way around and feel like, okay, do I want to work in this lab? Do I want to work with this person and with these people? And it's not super easy to find out, but you definitely get a feeling when you're there, when you talk with the PI, so try also to talk with as many people from this lab as possible. Maybe also a good advice is to talk with people who have been at this, or who were at this lab and are not anymore, because they maybe don't feel so they can be more open, maybe even.
Did you do that? Like contact people?
I didn't contact people specifically, but I was talking with people who I knew, also again from like conferences and stuff. So if you don't need to send them emails or so, but if you see there are people from this lab at a conference, like I at SFN, for example, I knew that there were like 3 people I would be interested in, like working in their labs. And I went to the posters of this group, and I didn't know them, or some of them I did, some of them I didn't know, but I just went to them, and then you start chatting with them and really take your time to get a feeling of, also how they are and what they might or may not say about their PIs. And this is the information that I think to me is harder to get, but is at least equally important than publications and being good scientists, because it's not going to be enough. You will spend a lot of time there, you want to learn something there, so you really want to make sure that it's going to be a good experience, because there's just so many other things to that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing that's maybe important to bear in mind is that there are loads of great scientists who are also great people. And
absolutely
great supervisors and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like it's this thing where you're looking for like 1 in a million or something. I think, as soon as you basically start talking to the PIs and the people in the group, it becomes fairly clear, I think, fairly quickly,
yes,
what it's like. But if you don't do that, then there's also lots of PIs who aren't maybe that great as mentors or whatever, right? Maybe they're great people, but they're just not great mentors or whatever.
Exactly. It's not easy to find that out, but the best thing is really talk with as many people as possible, talk with the advisor as often as possible, and also try to, be open and see if they open, ask all kinds of questions that you have. And I again, maybe I was just lucky, but I really like to think that this is what brought me where I am now, because like, again, Nathia and the whole lab, really, like, everything's just, it's really a pleasure to be there, to work there, because of the people, because of everybody is really good, but everybody is also really nice and helpful, and everybody collaborates. And so you want to get a feeling, and as you said, like, these labs exist, but you have to kind of work hard to find out where they are. And you really have to get a feeling for this. That's what I did. Like, I was talking with the people and tried to get a feeling. And if your feeling's not right, then I wouldn't go there, even if they have like 50 Nature publications. I wouldn't really care, because if it doesn't feel right, then it would be too risky.
It's not going to feel right for a few years straight. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, I think there was actually there's a podcast much more famous than mine, called Everything Hurts. And they talked about red flags in academia. And one of the things they talked about was for labs. And they said one of the red flags is basically if they really don't want you to talk to other people from the lab during an interview or something.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe I can give one example. And because this ethos was on his website, I don't think you'll mind me saying this. I once applied for a PhD position with Klaus Stefan, and I didn't get it. But in that interview, I'm sure there were one or two people who weren't there, but you got to meet the entire lab during the application procedure, basically. He has a big lab, so you don't meet them one by one because that would take forever. But you basically, during the application, you got to see and briefly talk to the entire lab. And I think that's just, as they also on that Everything Hurts episode mentioned, that's a pretty good statement from the lab. If they say talk to anyone from the lab, talk to the people. I don't know what it's like to work in that lab because I didn't get the position, but I think that kind of thing, same for my position now. For mine, it's a bit different because Christoph Kohn, my supervisor, started his lab and hired 3 people kind of at the same time. So there wasn't really anyone there, which made that impossible in the literal sense. But he also said, we're at the institute here, just meet a few people, right?
Yeah.
People who were in the same lab as him before and that kind of stuff. And I think basically if people do that, that's already a pretty good sign. Yeah. And I, during my applications, I also had some people where I didn't meet anyone from the lab. Right? Not necessarily a negative sign, but not necessarily a good one either. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even know it was a thing that, labs might not want you to talk with the people there, but honestly, that doesn't sound good. So I would,
yeah, exactly.
If someone tells me, "Oh, yeah, no, don't talk to my employees," then this is definitely a red flag. And I also would like to add one thing, and I see that if it's huge labs, you probably maybe not going to be able to talk with everybody. But I also want to say that these kind of one-on-one meetings, this was the really most important thing for me. One-on-one meeting with the advisor, but also one-on-one meeting, with as many people as possible, even if they are not even in the same lab, maybe neighboring labs, every single one-on-one meeting, you kind of hear things that are really relevant. And so I know it's not always possible to talk with everybody, but try to do this really, when you're at conferences, go to find out who is working in this lab. They usually have posters or just are at the conference, and just go there and start talking with them. And one-on-one meetings are the best thing because then people are, more open. And that was the main helpful thing for me.
So what were you looking for then? Was it just whether you like talking to the people and they seem like they have interesting ideas, or was there anything specific anything good or bad specifically you looked for, or was it just get an idea of who the people are?
I was not so much looking for ideas, and also not so much obviously I was interested, but it wasn't my main focus to learn what they are doing, because I wanted to follow my own ideas and plans anyways. But obviously this is something you can easily start to talk about. You meet someone and then you tell them who you are, they tell you what they do and who they are. So it's a good kind of opener. But then I was really interested in getting kind of the information about the lab, how it is to work there. Are people, working together, or does everybody have their own projects? And basically, do you have to do your own stuff yourself, or is there a group of people who is really executing one project together? How does this work? Or these kind of things. It's really something where it's more about getting a feeling of how the kind of mentality of the PI and of the lab members are, and if they the critical question is, do they like to be there? Are they happy where they are? And everything you can talk about with them is really just to find that out, because if they are happy, then you have a good chance that you're going to be happy too, right?
Yeah, and I guess many people won't say that they don't like being in the lab, but it's usually pretty clear when when that is the case, even if they won't say so explicitly.
Yeah, and also, many people want to talk about, what they're going through, and they are open, but maybe not like, maybe not if you ask them like in a talk where, like 25 people can hear them. But that's why I said like these one-on-one meetings, you can ask people like pretty openly, like, okay, how does it feel being a postdoc in this lab? Or how does it feel like doing your PhD in this lab? And maybe not everybody, but at least some people will give you an honest opinion. And that to me is the information that you want to get, in addition to, like, how is the science, how are the papers, how are the opportunities, how is the equipment? All of that is interesting, but the more interesting but harder to get information is really like, are the people there happy with like the mentoring, with the management, with collaborations, having good teachers, these kind of things. This is what you want to find out. And I think after talking with people for a little bit, most of the time, many PhD students and postdocs are happy to talk about that as well.
Mm-hmm. I have not sure whether you'll be able to answer this question, but I guess just let me know if you can't. For example, in my case, one thing I'm thinking about, I don't think I'll do it, but one thing I'm kind of playing around is the idea of saying like, okay, I've done stuff with humans now. It might be interesting to take the stuff I've learned with humans and actually apply it to animal studies. Not sure whether I'll actually do that. But this would, of course, in my case, mean a change of not necessarily field per se, but definitely methodology. And I guess in your case, maybe the reason why I'm asking you is because, as far as I can tell, in your PhD or before your postdoc, you'd been doing fMRI analysis, and in your postdoc, you're using basically EEG analysis, right? I mean, it's intracranial, but it's still EEG. And yeah, I mean, maybe was that a problem that you didn't, as far as I can tell, have direct experience in the methods you're going to use? Or
it's a very good question, but I always think it's the other way around. But I might be wrong. I guess it depends on the lab and again what they're looking for. But I think in my case it was more like the other way around, and I also think it can be the other way around more often, because if
the other way around, you mean what exactly?
So you're saying. Well, you were asking if it's a disadvantage that you don't kind of have the complete expertise that might be needed to do this postdoc. But I think it can be the other way around, as in it can be an advantage. Mm-hmm. Because what people bring to the lab is also very important for the PI. And if you just bring stuff that's already there, it's not gonna help them as much as, if there is somebody who's kind of doing something related, or, obviously you want to have some overlap. You want to say, okay, yeah, I have these cool ideas and I want to do this and I have some background also, but you kind of come from a different angle. And in my case, yes, it was a different method, but still, if you kind of have a different angle, it opens up an opportunity for them as well, because they get a different perspective, maybe new ideas, fresh ideas, creative ideas. I can imagine, I don't know, I have never worked in a lab that's doing, animal research, rodent research, but I can imagine that if you are like a rodent research lab, it might open up a million opportunities, or at least ideas, if you have a person who has done or has been doing something similar like in humans, right? Because then you can go in a more like transitional phase from, like rodents to humans, and ask different questions or just get different perspectives. So I think, and that's how I would frame it also, if you apply and if you talk with potential PIs. I would not say, I'm sorry, I'm not perfect because I don't have like experience with animal research. I would say like, okay, well, I would love to, like investigate what I have done in humans and try to, like tackle whatever this or that specific questions in animals to kind of bridge the gap or something. You know what I'm saying? So I would use it as an advantage and not as kind of oh yeah, sorry, I'm not perfect.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. Going in by saying, hi, I'm not perfect, but can I still have a job? It's maybe not the greatest way to start it, but it was also just, I guess what I'm also curious about is, I mean, I guess if you're good with MRI analysis and programming and basic maths or whatever, then learning EEG isn't the hardest thing. But it's also, I mean, for example, with animal research for me right now, the question is, do I want to spend that much time learning how to do those things during a postdoc, or is it just going to take too much time with a postdoc? And then by the end, I'll have learned another thing, but not really have, not have much to show for it, that kind of thing. I guess it depends on like also the length of your contract and that kind of stuff. But
I see.
If you have a 2-year postdoc, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would base this decision really on if you're interested in it, right? If it's just, something that you want to put on your CV, I mean, maybe it's not worth, just going a completely different direction because it sounds good. But if that's what you want to do, if you really want to do rodent research, but you only have experience with human research before, then yeah, sure, then it's definitely worth, spending the time and finding a lab where you can do that. And then there are for sure ways to, like phrase that and frame that so that it's an advantage that you don't have this experience. But I think this is really like, this is really a question of what are you interested in, and if you are ultimately interested in doing human research, then I don't think it's worth spending a lot of time to do something else, and then because then at the end you want to have another transition back to it's really just what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know whether I'm going to do it, even apply for stuff, but it's just one of those. Yeah, I guess it's an outside thought I have, and I guess also lots of listeners will have something similar where they, I've done memory research, but the new lab's in perception or whatever, whatever it might be.
But that's one of these things I meant. That's a perfect kind of, that's actually not a disadvantage. It's a perfect thing, right? Because there are like so many ways to combine this. And that to me would be the big selling point, like how you sell yourself to a potential employer, right? So you say, oh yeah, I have experience in, perception, and there are a million ways to merge that with what you're doing. So please give me a job. And then, if it feels right, then you got it. So that's what I do. I would totally use that as an advantage.
Maybe as a kind of last question about postdoc stuff is maybe like what exactly is, this is a broad question, but what exactly is the purpose of a postdoc? Like what, maybe PhD and postdoc, like what am I supposed to be able to do or know or whatever? I mean, is PhD for me, let's say maybe PhD was something where I really wanted to figure out what I wanted to do, as in terms of like I'd done lots of different things before, like pretty varied, but I didn't, and I had like a few things I was interested in, but it didn't narrow down to like a specific question or topic per se. And, now I've I think I found that. So that's, for me, that counts as a success for my PhD. So like, I don't know, what's the postdoc stage for,
So I can imagine that this can be very different. So I can tell you how it is for me, how I feel about it. For me, being a PhD student was really kind of to learn the basics and the fundamentals of being a scientist, and also find your direction. And then it's great that you can already say that you did that, because that's I think it's a very important step also to figure out what you're interested in and what you want to do, and finding kind of your career theme, so to say. So that's a good thing. But for me, PhD is really learning and being trained in being a scientist. So then postdoc for me, there is obviously an overlap because I'm still learning all the time. And so obviously, and also I found a very nice career theme only like during my postdoc, basically. I mean, or at least it's getting more and more specific during my postdoc. But for me, postdoc is more like learning how to be also not only like a scientist, but also how to work in academia or in this setting, which includes many more things than just, knowing what you're interested in and doing it in terms of techniques and analysis and all these kind of things. But it's what I said before. It's like, being a postdoc, you should try to get as much experience and learn how to be like a mentor, how to be a manager, like, how to manage projects, maybe even multiple projects at the same time, how to get an overview, how to get the big picture, kind of, right? So, or how to be a teacher also. So that to me, it's like, the PhD prepares you how to be like a scientist in terms of how to do the work. But then being a postdoc, hopefully, is more the phase where you learn how to be a PI, how to be a leader, kind of. And that to me is, just to circle back to what I said before, that is exactly also why you want to make sure that the person you're learning from, like in my case, Nantia, you want to make sure that this person can teach you that. And Nantia is like really, that's to me, it feels like that's one of her main strengths, is like she's such a great mentor and manager. And like these are things that I have not learned during my PhD. And I didn't even focus on, because you're doing science, you're doing your projects. But here I really learn, and she involves me in things that are, beyond working on a project. It's really like how to, manage things, how to mentor students, these kind of things. Also, how to even, like survive in academia, like networking, how do you get a job? All of these things, they come, like on top of doing your project. This is the important thing, at least during my postdoc time. And yeah, this is also what makes it great being in this particular lab, because, I learn from like really good examples like Nantia, and also others are just, like doing this really, really well, and they involve me. And this is why why I'm happy to be a postdoc here. And, so imagine after your PhD, you directly be a PI. That's all stuff that you've never learned. You have no idea how to be like a manager and a mentor and all these kind of things. And maybe you're just naturally really good at it, but it's definitely helpful, at least for me, to see this, based on other people who are really good at it.
So you've mentioned you've kind of found your research theme, or narrowed it down a bit during your postdoc. What is that research theme, or what's kind of stuff you want to be doing in the next few years, or maybe even long-term future?
So I started first a bit more like on a broader scale with spatial navigation and, this cognitive map thing, like how do you know where you are? How do we all know where we are? How do we find our way around? And and during my postdoc, I was also following that kind of idea and this direction. But so the next step is basically, and this is what I've already started doing with the Nature paper, and this is what I basically want to build upon this and go further in this direction. And I'm very happy that I found this kind of career theme, because it's very interesting. It seems like also the community, kind of hopefully funding agencies and all of the, like it's just something that people are interested in. And this is like, how do we not only, like navigate in our environment, how do we know where we are, but also how do we integrate other things in a more naturalistic scenario? How do we integrate, for example, other people into our cognitive map, right? How do we know where other people are? How do we know where objects are? And one specific thing that I want to add to that, and this is something that it's more like a plan for the future. We haven't done that yet, but this should kind of go into this career theme, is I would like to combine all of this by not only researching, like where we are, where someone else is, but also who they are, in terms of there's just so much we don't understand about, how do we keep track of where we are? How do we keep track of where other people, for example, are? But then also the social aspect of this, like who are they in terms of, your social or emotional or hierarchical relationships, for example. All of this plays a very important role in, like how do we encode where someone else is, but also who this other person is. And ultimately, this is also going to be very important, not only for basic scientific understanding of how the brain works, but also all of these functions are strongly affected by different neurodegenerative diseases, for example. Just thinking of Alzheimer's as one example, but there are many, many more where these functions of the brain are pretty heavily kind of compromised and impaired. So this is definitely what I first, want to try to establish kind of a fundamental understanding of these things, like where are we, where are others, who are others, what's kind of how do we encode information about others? Because if we have this understanding, then we can also think about, how can we help people where these functions are impaired, like Alzheimer's or other disease cases.
Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm happy about this as well, because this is something that I'm very interested in, and I think it's just really, it can be potentially like really impactful and helpful, not only for careers, but also for people in general, and with the perspective of, being very useful for clinical cases.